The fork clattered against the porcelain plate like a gunshot in the stuffy silence of the dining room, shattering the fragile pretense of civility. Jackson's mother, Evelyn, froze mid-sip of her Chardonnay, her perfectly manicured nails whitening around the stem of the glass. "You think that's love?" she hissed, her voice slicing through the air like a winter gale off Puget Sound, eyes locked on Aiden as if he were a stain on their heirloom tablecloth. Aiden's hand trembled in Jackson's lap, but he didn't pull away, not yet. The weight of 27 years of unspoken rules pressed down on them both, heavier than the rain-slicked evergreens outside their Seattle suburb home. Jackson's heart hammered, a wild drumbeat echoing the storm brewing beyond the bay windows, as his father's gravelly cough cut in. "Boy, we've tolerated a lot from you, but this ends tonight." Jackson had always known his family was a fortress, impenetrable, ancient, built on the bones of old money and older prejudices. The Hargrove name stretched back to the timber barons who clear-cut Washington state's forests in the late 1800s, turning wild land into tidy estates like the one they sat in now, a sprawling craftsman on the east side of Lake Washington, with its vaulted ceilings and walls lined in mahogany bookshelves stuffed with first editions no one ever read. It was the kind of place that screamed success, stability, the American dream wrapped in plaid flannel and fluted columns. But fortresses had gates, and Jackson had slammed his wide open the day he brought Aiden home. They'd met 2 years earlier at a dive bar in Capitol Hill, the heart of Seattle's queer scene, where the air smelled of craft IPAs and desperation. Jackson was nursing a hangover from a board meeting gone south, fresh out of his MBA at UW, climbing the ranks at his father's real estate firm, Hargrove Properties. He was 25 then, all sharp jawline and tailored slacks, the golden boy who could charm a room but hated the mirror in the mornings. Aiden was 26. A barista/aspiring photographer with ink-black hair that fell like a curtain over one hazel eye, tattoos snaking up his arms from gigs in underground bands he'd left behind in Portland. Their eyes met over a spilled pint of stout, and by closing time, Jackson's hand was on Aiden's thigh under the sticky bar top, the world narrowing to the heat of that touch. It wasn't fireworks. It was a slow burn, the kind that starts with late-night drives along the waterfront, windows down, Nirvana blasting from the speakers as fairy horns wailed in the distance. Aiden taught Jackson how to frame a shot with his Canon, capturing the fog rolling off the Olympics, the neon haze of Pike Place Market at dawn. Jackson showed Aiden the underbelly of privilege. Rooftop parties in Belltown where tech bros in hoodies dropped six figures on startups that flopped by morning. They fell into each other like rain into the sound, messy and inevitable. "You're my anchor," Jackson whispered one night, tangled in Aiden's sheets in a cramped queen and walk-up, the city lights flickering like distant stars through the blinds. But anchors drag. Jackson's coming out had been a quiet implosion 6 months in, over Easter brunch in this very dining room. Evelyn had set the table with her Wedgwood china, the one etched with forget-me-nots, and Jackson's words tumbled out amid the clink of silver. "I'm gay, Mom. And I love him." His father, Harlan, had set down his Bloody Mary without a word, face reddening like the V8 mix, before storming out to the deck to stare at the lake as if it held answers. Evelyn had cried soft, theatrical sobs that filled the room like smoke, muttering about prayers and fixing this phase. They didn't disown him, not outright. Harlan kept him on payroll. Evelyn sent passive-aggressive care packages of self-help books disguised as novels. But Aiden? He was the intruder, the fox in the henhouse. Tonight was supposed to be the olive branch. Harlan's 60th birthday, A milestone Evelyn had insisted on marking with family only, though she'd relented when Jackson threatened to skip it entirely. Aiden had dressed up, buttoned down from Goodwill, slacks ironed crisp, his camera bag left in the car like contraband. They'd arrived at dusk, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the downpour, Jackson's knuckles white on the wheel of his Audi. "It'll be fine," he'd lied, kissing Aiden's temple in the driveway, tasting salt from nervous sweat. Now, as the storm raged outside, the real tempest brewed within. Evelyn's eyes, sharp as the spode teacup she clutched, bored into Aiden. "We invited you here out of courtesy, young man. But let's not pretend this is normal." Harlan grunted agreement, carving into his rib-eye with unnecessary force, the knife screeching faintly against the plate. Jackson's sister, Lila, 32, married to a venture capitalist with a receding hairline, shifted uncomfortably, her toddler gurgling obliviously in a high chair at the end of the table. The air thickened with the scent of rosemary and resentment, the chandelier above casting fractured light like broken promises. Aiden cleared his throat, his voice steady despite the tremor in his fingers. "Mrs. Hargrove, I get it. Traditions run deep here. But Jackson's not asking for your blessing. He's just asking for a seat at the table." It was the wrong tack. Evelyn's lips thinned to a razor line. "A seat? This isn't some commune in the hills. This is our legacy. And you're a distraction. A phase he'll outgrow when he settles down properly." The words landed like punches, each one thudding into Jackson's chest. He watched Aiden's face crumple. Just for a second, the flicker of hurt behind those hazel eyes. The boy who'd grown up foster hopping in Oregon, learning early that love was a loan you paid back in blood. Jackson's own rage bubbled up, hot and familiar, the same fire that had driven him to drop out of his fraternity sophomore year after a drunken hookup went viral on the group chat. But before he could erupt, Harlan leaned forward, his voice a low rumble like thunder over the Cascades. "Son, we've built something here. Stability. You throw that away for this? It's not too late to course correct." Aiden's hand slipped from Jackson's, the absence a cold void. He pushed back his chair, the legs scraping like nails on chalkboard, and stood. Rain lashed the windows in sheets, mirroring the storm in his eyes. "Course correct? You mean erase him? Pretend he's not the best damn thing that's ever happened to me?" His accent thickened with emotion, that faint Pacific Northwest drawl sharpening into something raw. Lila's husband, Tom, coughed awkwardly into his napkin, but no one moved to intervene. Jackson rose too, heart pounding, the room spinning like the fairies in a gale. This was it, the fracture line they'd been dancing on since day one. He thought of the nights Aiden had held him through panic attacks, whispering poetry from Ginsberg into his ear until the world steadied. Of the road trip to Olympic National Park, where they'd hiked to Solduk Falls and Aiden had proposed with a ring carved from driftwood, vowing forever under the ancient cedars. This wasn't just dinner, it was war. The backlash hit like a Pacific squall, swift and unrelenting. After Aiden's outburst, the evening unraveled in slow motion. Evelyn excused herself to the kitchen, her heels clicking like gunfire on the slate floor, emerging minutes later with a tray of tiramisu she served in stony silence. Harlan retreated to his study, a tumbler of scotch in hand, leaving Jackson to field Lila's whispered apologies. "Mom's just scared. You know how she is," while Tom distracted the kid with airplane noises from a pureed pea pouch. Aiden sat rigid, staring at his uneaten potatoes au gratin, the steam long gone cold. They left before coffee, Jackson murmuring excuses about an early meeting, Aiden's jaw set like the basalt cliffs along the coast. In the car, the heater blasting against the chill seeping through the vents, Aiden finally broke. "I can't do this, Jax." Pretending for them, swallowing their shit like it's caviar. "It's poison." Jackson gripped the wheel tighter. The Bellevue skyline blurring in the rearview, those glassy condos his father had developed, symbols of the empire he was heir to. "They're my family," he said, voice cracking. "Doesn't that count for something?" Aiden laughed, bitter as black coffee. "Family? They're a board of directors voting on your soul." He turned to the window, fogging the glass with his breath, tracing a heart that smeared under his thumb. Jackson reached for him, but Aiden flinched just a fraction, enough to carve a chasm. That night, in their apartment overlooking the ship canal, they made love like it was absolution. Urgent, bodies slick with rain and regret, Aiden's nails raking down Jackson's back as if to etch permanence. But dawn brought no clarity, only the hollow echo of unspoken ultimatums. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk over the Duwamish. At work, Harlan buried Jackson in spreadsheets, redevelopment proposals for the Central District, where gentrification was code for erasure. "Focus on the numbers, son," he'd grunt during their one-on-ones, eyes avoiding the rainbow pin Jackson had started wearing on his lapel. Evelyn's texts arrived like clockwork, Bible verses sandwiched between recipes for pot roast, links to support groups that reeked of conversion therapy. Lila called once, her voice syrupy with mediation. "Give them time." Tom's family was the same old-school Catholics. Now they send onesies for the baby. Aiden, meanwhile, poured his fury into his lens. He took gigs shooting protests in California Anderson Park, capturing the fury of drag queens and trans activists clashing with counter-protesters under the evergreens. His Instagram filled with black and white frames, fists raised against blue skies, signs reading "Love wins," even in the rain. Jackson scrolled through them at midnight, Aiden asleep beside him, the glow illuminating the shadows under his eyes. Pride had come and gone that June, rain-soaked floats down 4th Avenue, confetti sticking to leather harnesses, but the high faded fast against the Hargrove chill. Then came the betrayal, sharp as a switchblade in the gut. It started with a tip from an anonymous email. "Check your father's desk." Legacy isn't just land. Jackson dismissed it at first, paranoia from too many true crime podcasts. But curiosity gnawed, and one rainy Tuesday, while Harlan was schmoozing investors at the Four Seasons, Jackson slipped into the corner office overlooking Elliott Bay. The desk was a relic, leather inlaid, cluttered with fountain pens and framed photos of Lila's wedding, Jackson's graduation, no trace of Aiden. He rifled drawers, heart thudding, until his fingers brushed a manila folder tucked behind tax returns. Inside, printouts of Aiden's social media, screenshots from dive bars in Portland, old party pics, blurry shots of him shirtless at a warehouse rave, a now-deleted post about ditching the straight life for good. But worse, a private investigator's report, dated 3 weeks prior. Subject: Aiden Reese. Background: unstable employment history. History of petty theft, juvenile record sealed. No known assets. Potential flight risk in relationships. See attached X statements. Jackson's stomach lurched. Aiden had mentioned a rough youth, shoplifting bread to feed foster siblings. But this, it was weaponized, twisted into ammunition. And there, clipped to the last page, a draft email from Harlan to Evelyn. Son's infatuation confirmed as liability. Recommend intervention, discreet detox program in Arizona. Leverage firm position if needed. Detox. As if Aiden were a habit to kick. Not the man who'd pulled Jackson from the brink of a bottle after his first breakup. Rage boiled up, hot and volcanic, but beneath it, a deeper wound, his father, the man who'd taught him to skip stones on Lake Sammamish, now plotting to shatter his world. He confronted Harlan that evening over takeout pho in the office, the steam curling like accusations. "Dad, what the hell is this?" He slapped the folder down, pages fanning out like fallen leaves. Harlan's face drained of color, then hardened into the mask of a dealmaker closing a hostile takeover. "Protecting you, Jackson. That boy's trouble drifts like driftwood. You'll thank me when you're CEO, with a real partner by your side." "A real partner?" Jackson's voice rose, echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You mean someone who checks your boxes? White collar, no ink, no past." Harlan stood, towering in his Brooks Brothers suit, the city lights twinkling mockingly below. "Legacy demands sacrifices. You think I wanted to marry your mother? It was strategy, stability over fireworks. You'll learn." The words hung there, a guillotine blade. Jackson stormed out, the elevator plummeting like his illusions, rain greeting him on the street like an old friend. He drove aimlessly, past the locks where salmon leaped against the current, radio static crackling with forecasts of more storms. By the time he reached home, Aiden was editing photos on the couch, feet tucked under a mariner's blanket. "Rough day?" he asked, not looking up. Jackson sank beside him, the folder burning a hole in his messenger bag. You could say that. He wanted to spill it all, the PI, the email, the casual cruelty of blood ties. But the words stuck, tarry and thick. Instead, he pulled Aiden close, burying his face in the crook of his neck, inhaling the scent of darkroom chemicals and home. "I love you," he murmured, fierce as the tide. Aiden tilted his head, searching his eyes. "Then fight for it, Jax, or we'll drown." The fracture widened like a fault line under the Olympics, tremors rippling through every corner of their life. Jackson couldn't unsee the folder, its clinical type, the highlighted risks like scarlet letters. He hid it in his desk drawer, but it haunted him. Late nights staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, replaying Harlan's words like a bad loop. Strategy over fireworks. Was that what he'd become? A spreadsheet entry, assets and liabilities tallied against the heart? Aiden sensed the shift. Of course. He always did, reading Jackson like a negative in the developer tray. Their mornings stretched longer. Coffee on the balcony overlooking the canal. Freighters gliding past like ghosts. Aiden's camera clicking softly as he captured the mist. "You're pulling away," he'd say. Not accusatory, just fact. Like noting the barometers drop before rain. Jackson would deny it, kiss him until words dissolved. But the lie festered. He threw himself into work, volunteering for the Central District project, pushing for affordable units amid the luxury condos, a quiet rebellion against his father's blueprint. "See, I'm not just the heir," he'd tell himself in the mirror, tie straightened, pin gleaming. But betrayal has echoes. Lila cornered him at a family barbecue in late August. Backyard ribs smoking on the deck, the lake a mirror of blue under relentless sun. While Evelyn fussed over salads and Tom chased the kid with a frisbee, she pulled him aside by the rhododendrons. "Dad showed me the file," she whispered, eyes darting like a deer in headlights. "He's worried, Jax. That guy's got baggage, legal stuff from back east. What if he drags you down? Jackson's forkful of coleslaw turned to ash in his mouth. You too? Snooping on my life like it's a goddamn audit. Lila flushed, twisting her wedding band. It's not snooping, it's love. Hard love. Remember when I dated that artist in college? Dad pulled the same strings, saved me from dropping out. Her voice softened, pleading. You're the baby, the prodigy. Don't throw it away on a fling. Fling. The word ignited something primal. Jackson shoved back from the picnic table, chair tipping into the grass. Aiden's not a fling, Lil. He's my future. And if you all can't see that, maybe you're the ones with baggage. He left early, tires spitting gravel down the driveway, Aiden waiting in the passenger seat with a six-pack of Rainier and a playlist of Elliott Smith ballads. They drove to Golden Gardens, parking by the dunes where driftwood bonfires crackled under the stars. The sound lapped at the shore, dark and endless, as they stripped to boxers and waded in, the cold shocking the breath from their lungs. Tell me what's eating you, Aiden demanded, water beating on his lashes like tears. Jackson broke then, the folder's contents spilling out in sobs that mingled with the waves. Aiden held him, fierce and unyielding, murmuring, they're scared of losing control. But you're free. Freedom tasted like salt and possibility, but it came at a cost. Harlan summoned Jackson to the office the next day, the confrontation scripted like a deposition. You're off the Central Project, he announced, leaning back in his swivel chair, the bay a stormy gray beyond. Too emotional. Stick to numbers. Jackson's fists clenched under the desk. Emotional? Or because I'm fighting for people like Aiden? Folks your development's price out. Harlan's eyes narrowed, the first crack in the patriarch facade. This isn't about politics. It's about you. That Reese boy, he's using you. Leverage for a green card, a foot in the door. The accusation landed like a sucker punch. Aiden was American-born, Oregon through and through, but doubt wormed in. Jackson stormed out, but not before snatching a client file, ironic justice, a blueprint for a queer youth center in Soto he'd buried under approvals. It was petty theft of time, but it felt like reclaiming ground. He funneled it to Aiden anonymously, watching from afar as his boyfriend networked it through activist channels. The center's groundbreaking hitting the stranger's pages weeks later, Hargrove Ayre's secret gift to LGBTQ plus youth. The ripples reached Evelyn next. She arrived unannounced one crisp October afternoon, bearing a casserole of green bean bake, her peace offering, laced with judgment. Aiden was at a shoot in Fremont, bridges under golden leaves, so Jackson let her in, the apartment's thrift store charm a stark contrast to her Chanel tweed. She perched on the edge of the couch, surveying the framed prints of Aiden's work. A pride march in the rain, lovers embracing against a mural of Harvey Milk. It's eclectic, she said, voice tight. Mom, why are you here? Jackson poured chamomile, hands steady despite the undercurrent. She set the dish down, folding her hands like a supplicant. To talk sense into you. Your father's methods were wrong. The investigator, that was impulsive. But darling, Aiden's world isn't ours. He's got no roots, no prospects. You'll wake up at 40, alone in a corner office, wondering what happened to your life. The words echoed his nightmares, the ones where he aged into Harlan's clone, scotch in hand, regrets piling like unread mail. But Aiden's face flashed, laughing over burnt pancakes, tracing galaxies on Jackson's skin in the dark. "You don't know him," Jackson said, voice low. "He's got more heart than this whole firm's portfolio. And roots, we're planting them together." Evelyn's eyes welled, mascara threatening a smudge. "I just want you happy. Safe." She stood, smoothing her skirt, the rain starting again in soft patters against the pane. At the door, she paused, hand on the knob. "Bring him to Thanksgiving. No ultimatums. Just try." It was a concession, fragile as rice paper, but Jackson nodded, the first thaw in the ice. Thanksgiving loomed like a thunderhead, the holiday a Hargrove ritual. Turkey from a Ballard farm, pies from Evelyn's recipe box, the extended clan descending like locusts. Jackson prepped Aiden with pep talks over pumpkin ale at the Pike Brewing taproom, fairy lights twinkling in the rafters. "They're thawing," he insisted, though doubt gnawed. Aiden smirked, clinking bottles. "Or plotting the kill shot. Either way, I'm in for you." The drive to Medina was a blur of I-90 traffic, evergreens bowing under wind. As they pulled into the drive, Harlan on the porch with a cigar, the air hummed with anticipation. Inside, the table groaned under crystal and linen, scents of sage and cranberry mingling with tension. Lila hugged Aiden stiffly. Tom clapped his shoulder with forced bro vibes. Evelyn air-kissed cheeks, her smile a tight wire. Harlan grunted a greeting, eyes appraising over his reading glasses. Dinner began civilly. Small talk about the Mariners' playoff choke, the kids' first steps. Aiden charmed with stories of his latest exhibit at a Capitol Hill gallery, prints of Seattle's hidden alleys where love bloomed in graffiti tags. Laughter bubbled, tentative, like champagne uncorking. But as the pie plates cleared, Harlan cleared his throat, the room stilling. "Aiden, we've appreciated your presence. But Jackson's future, our future, requires clarity. This arrangement, it's not sustainable." The fork slipped from Aiden's hand, clinking softly. Evelyn nodded, voice quavering. "We love our son. But love means protecting him from instability." The word hung, laced with the PI's poison. Jackson's pulse roared, the room tilting. Aiden's eyes met his, a silent question, fight or fold. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring, the only sound the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Evelyn's heirloom from her grandmother, ticking away seconds like judgments. Jackson's mind raced, fragments colliding, the folder's cold print, Lila's whispered warnings, the warmth of Aiden's hand in his under the table now, slick with sweat. This was the gauntlet, thrown down amid the harvest bounty, the irony bitter as oversteeped tea. Aiden drew a breath, slow and deliberate, his chest rising like the tide before a swell. He didn't stand, didn't shout. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the damask cloth, meeting Harlan's gaze head-on. The room's eyes pinned him. Evelyn's hopeful, Lila's uneasy, Tom's neutral as a weather report. "Mr. Hargrove," Aiden began, voice steady as the fairy horns beyond the storm. "I appreciate the candor. Really. Growing up, I learned candor the hard way, no sugarcoating when the fridge is empty or the lights go out. So let me return it." He paused, glancing at Jackson, a flicker of that Portland grit shining through. The kid who'd hustled Prince at art walks to pay rent, who'd inked resilient on his forearm after his last foster placement at 17. "You see me as instability. A risk. And yeah, I've got scars, juvenile records from stealing to eat, gigs that ghosted by morning. But Jackson, he's not my mark. He's my north. Harlan shifted, cigar ash flaking onto his napkin. But Aiden pressed on, words gaining momentum like a downhill run on Rainier. 2 years ago, he walked into that bar looking like the world had chewed him up and spat him out. Stressed from your empire, chasing approval like it was oxygen. I saw a guy drowning in expectations, building walls higher than these cascades. And I thought, damn, I know that ache. Evelyn's hand fluttered to her throat, pearls clicking softly. Lila leaned in, toddler dozing against her. Aiden's hazel eyes softened, not with pity, but memory. My last foster dad, good man, trucker out of Eugene, taught me to fish the Willamette. Said, son, rivers don't judge your bait. They just flow. Jackson's my river. He pulled me from my own eddies, nights I couldn't sleep, ghosts of exes who bailed when shit got real. He framed my shots when my hands shook, drove me to NA meetings without a word. That's stability, not some balance sheet. The words landed soft, then deep, burrowing like roots through cracked soil. Jackson's throat tightened, tears pricking. This was Aiden unfiltered, the poet beneath the tattoos, the one who'd whispered sonnets in the dark after Jackson's panic attacks. Harlan's face remained stone, but his fingers drummed the table, a tell from 1,000 boardrooms. But here's the single sentence that matters, Aiden continued, voice dropping to a timbre that vibrated through the crystal. Jackson didn't choose me to rebel. He chose me because in a world of spreadsheets and legacies, I'm the one variable that adds up to whole. The room exhaled collectively, the clock's tick resuming like applause. Harlan's drumming stopped. He stared at Aiden, not with disdain, but something akin to recognition, the echo of his own youth. Perhaps, bartering timber rights in smoky saloons for a stake in the future. Evelyn's eyes glistened, a tear tracing the powder on her cheek. Whole, she echoed, voice a whisper. Lila reached across, squeezing Aiden's wrist. That's beautiful. Jackson turned to Aiden, the man who just dismantled a dynasty with 12 words, love swelling fierce and full. He squeezed his hand, visible now above the table, a declaration. Harlan cleared his throat, the sound gravelly, human. Variable. Huh? Never thought of it that way. He pushed back his chair, standing to refill glasses from the sideboard, a ritual delay. When he returned, scotch glinting amber, he raised his tumbler. To variables. And to not knowing everything. It wasn't absolution, not yet. But it was fracture mended, the first weld in a bridge. The rest of the evening unfolded in fits. Awkward toasts. Tom cracking dad jokes about pie fights. The kid waking to smear pumpkin across Aiden's sleeve, eliciting real laughter that bounced off the beams. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, stars piercing the clouds like hesitant promises. In the days that followed, the thaw accelerated. Harlan assigned Jackson back to the central project, this time with a budget bump. For the optics, he grumbled, but his eyes held a glint of pride. Evelyn invited Aiden to tea, bombarding him with questions about his camera over scones in her garden, even commissioning a family portrait. Something tasteful, dear. No nudes. Lila texted daily, sharing memes about tough love fails, her apologies laced with sisterly barbs. But catharsis isn't linear. Shadows lingered. Jackson found the PI report shredded in the office trash. A quiet excision, but trust rebuilt brick by brick. Aiden's exhibit sold out, his work hanging in a Belltown loft. Jackson's favorite, a diptych of them at Golden Gardens, waves crashing eternal. Our anchor, the plaque read, simple as that. Winter gripped Seattle, holidays a whirlwind of compromise. Hanukkah candles flickering beside the menorah Evelyn dusted off. New Year's at a queer club in the ID where Harlan showed up uninvited, nursing a gin and tonic in the corner, nodding along to RuPaul remixes. It was messy, human the American way, stitched from flaws and forgiveness. Yet beneath the mending, Jackson felt the pull of deeper currents. Aiden's restlessness grew, whispers of a fellowship in New York, shooting for the Village Voice, capturing the pulse of a city that never slept. It's a chance, he'd say over midnight ramen, chopsticks poised. But us, Jackson would nod, fear coiling like fog. Legacy wasn't just Hargrove. It was theirs, forged in defiance. Spring erupted in riotous green, azaleas exploding along the Burke-Gilman Trail where Jackson and Aiden ran at dawn, breaths sinking to the rhythm of rebirth. The youth center broke ground in a ceremony under cerulean skies, Aiden's lens immortalizing the shovel turns, Harlan in the dirt, sleeves rolled, a rare grin cracking his facade as kids from the program cheered. Evelyn baked cookies for the volunteers, her recipe card annotated with Aiden's tweaks. Less butter, more love. It was progress, patchwork and precious, the kind earned in increments. But high tides recede, an old ghost stirred. Harlan's health faltered mid-May, a mild heart episode during a golf outing at Overlake, the kind doctors chalk up to stress and scotch. He waved off the hospital bed with gruff jokes, just the sound calling me home early, but the scare cracked him open. One evening, post-discharge, he summoned Jackson and Aiden to the study, the room redolent of pipe tobacco and aged leather. Fire crackled in the grate, casting shadows that danced like unspoken fears. Sit, Harlan rumbled, gesturing to the wingbacks. Jackson complied, Aiden beside him, the air thick with import. Harlan steepled his fingers. The man who'd once loomed colossal now diminished, hospital bracelet still loose on his wrist. I was wrong, he said, the admission landing like a felled cedar. About the boy, about you, son. Saw my father in the mirror that night, clutching control like a life raft. He built this, a sweep toward the window, the estate's lights winking, on fear. No room for variables. Aiden's hand found Jackson's, a lifeline. Harlan met their gaze, eyes softening in the firelight. Aiden, that report, trash. Your family now. Messy, inked up family, but blood don't mean squat without heart. The words hung, a benediction. Tears welled in Jackson's eyes, the boy who'd craved this nod since Little League trophies gathered dust. Aiden nodded, throat working. Means more than you know, sir. The reconciliation rippled outward. Evelyn hosted a garden party in June. Solstice sun gilding the roses, a string quartet from the symphony playing Gershwin under the gazebo. Lila's kid toddled between legs, Aiden hoisting him for a piggyback tour of the koi pond. Harlan pulled Jackson aside by the pergola, voice low. Proud of you, son. Not the air, the man. It was the closest to, I love you Harlan ever voiced, raw as salmon fresh from the stream. Yet romance, true to form, thrived in the interstices. Jackson and Aiden escaped to the San Juans for their anniversary, a ferry ride to Orcas Island, cabin tucked in Madronas, the Salish Sea a turquoise expanse. They kayaked at dusk, seals barking from the rocks. Then made love on a blanket by the fire pit, stars wheeling overhead. "Marry me," Jackson murmured post-climax. The driftwood ring from years back now joined by a simple band he'd hidden in his pack, white gold, etched with coordinates of their first bar. Aiden's yes was a gasp, sealing vows in salt air and embers. The wedding was a blend. July under the big leaf maples in Discovery Park, Harlan walking Jackson down an aisle of wildflowers, Evelyn dabbing tears with a lace hanky. Aiden's Portland crew mingled with Hargrove cousins, toasts flowing from IPAs to vintage Cabernet. Vows echoed the sound's cadence. In variables and victories, "I choose you," sealed with a kiss that drew whoops and a single, stunned sob from Evelyn. Life settled into a new rhythm, human and humming. Jackson rose in the firm, steering it toward ethical builds, affordable housing in Rainier Valley, green spaces reclaiming old lots. Aiden's fellowship led to a book deal. Edges of Us, Queer Seattle, pages filled with their story woven subtle as thread. They adopted a rescue mutt named Drift, walks along Alki Beach where gulls wheeled and sunsets bled pink. But humanity's arc bends toward light through storm. 2 years on, Harlan passed quietly in his sleep, heart giving final notice after a lifetime of holding court. The funeral was lakeside, eulogies under drizzling skies, Jackson's words a bridge. He learned late, but he learned to love without ledger. Aiden stood sentinel, hand in his, the fortress yielding to fields. In the end, they built their own legacy, not of timber or titles, but touchstones. A home in Finney Ridge with a darkroom nook and balcony garden. Sunday suppers where Lila's family crashed the gate, laughter drowning old echoes. Jackson, tracing Aiden's tattoos in the hush of midnight, knew the truth. Love wasn't a fortress, but a river endless, carving canyons from stone, flowing toward whatever sea awaited. And in that flow, they were whole.